Welcome to the Four Seasons Podcast, brought to you by B&H Wealth Strategies, serving Northeast Tennessee and Southwest Virginia since 1966. Here, we guide you through the ever-changing seasons of your financial journey, offering insights to help you grow, protect, and enjoy your wealth. Ready to turn your financial dreams into reality? Dare to dream. And now, here's your host, President of B&H Wealth Strategies, Jeff Bingham.
Global events can have a significant impact on planning, savings, and short and long-term planning strategy. Welcome back, everybody. Skip Money back in the studio with President of B&H Wealth Strategies, Mr. Jeff Bingham. Jeff, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back, Skip. Looking forward to it. The topic of this one, which we'll kick off here in a minute, is certainly timely. Only thing I would kind of add to that as you kick it off here in a moment is that remember that we're recording this on Monday, March the 16th, and by the time we go through edits and whatnot, some of perhaps what we talk about, we'll try to keep it general. Will probably be will have moved, a little bit. So keep in mind when you watch this and you're seeing this live or not live, but the recording of this that we're what date we're on when we do this.
Very, very timely issue. A lot going on in the world right now, in Iran, in the Middle East, all over the Middle East, and our involvement in Israel. So, very timely subject. What impact can recent events in the Middle East have on financial markets and specifically my financial planning?
Yeah, like I said, it's been obviously having a lot of conversation about this. There's a lot of information out there. Kind of what I always kind of talk about news and noise that's out there. So I'll try to break this down and keep it as short and concise as I can on this. Is that when this war in Iran, without going into the merits of it, let's say, but we're involved in it right now, so we're there, alongside with Israel. Maybe there's a few other countries that are beginning to kind of at least begin to come on board with this to police the Straits of Hormuz, and that's going to be what we'll spend a little bit of time, talking about. That's where the disruption and some of the affordability of the investments, the disruption in global economics are going to take place. But right now, the biggest thing that we see and that we feel on a regular basis as both as investors and as citizens and consumers is that oil prices have been all over the board, but they are up, and they are up significantly from March the 1st when this war started. On March the 1st, we were somewhere between $65 and $70 a barrel of oil at that point in time. This morning, last look that I had was around $94, $95 a barrel. So do the arithmetic on that. That's, that's, we're 35%, maybe as much as 40% up. We've also seen some over the weekend. We saw oil prices, go over $100 a barrel. Weekend before last, we saw them touch nearly 120. They came down, early on Monday. So there's a lot of moving back and forth right there. I mean, we've been as high as nearly 120. We also saw oil pull back to as low as $76 a barrel a couple of weeks ago for a short period of time during an intraday trade. And that has to do with the moving target of information that's coming out of there. But where that is coming from is not that Iran is a large supplier of oil around the world, because the sanctions and everything that they've had levied against them for years and years now, they really are a very small supplier of the world's oil supply. But 20% of the US supply goes through the Straits of Hormuz. Maybe it's a little bit more than 20, but roughly 20% of it. And of that 20% of oil that goes, of all the world's supply of oil that goes through there, 80 to 90% of it goes to Asia, and most of that goes to China. So, and I think that's very significant, and what we can touch back on that in a moment ago. So, there's a lot of of interest in kind of controlling and policing the Straits of Hormuz. And I think part of getting Iran, unsettled out of power, of which the mullahs and the Ayatollah has had over there for the last 47 years since the overthrow of the Shah, they've always been disruptive in the Straits of Hormuz. And so hopefully, through this, that as we weaken them militarily, obviously economically, and so on, that can be something that gets remedied, that they won't be the sponsor of terror around the world, that we can, and again, these are lofty goals, and that the Straits of Hormuz will have more, um, you won't have to worry about all the time they're mining, that they're blowing up ships or sending drones in there, because that's kind of where they've been decimated militarily. But how are they disrupting the Straits of Hormuz and keeping oil is where they are, which is what their goal is, right? Their leverage is to keep oil prices as high as it can be. Their stated goal is to drive it to $200 a barrel. I do not think that they will be successful in that. That is my opinion. But you can see they've been able to bounce it to over $100 several times and keep it well above where it was, pre-war. But and they're doing that with, their Navy has essentially been sunk. They have no Air Force to speak of, but what they do have, or they can go drop mines, in the straits, they don't need their Navy to do that, if you will. They can do it with boats and whatnot. They can do it, just regular boats, so to speak. They also have an incredible amount of drones, which drones are the dreaded, kind of in today's warfare. I mean, they're just treacherous little things that cost, like $20,000 to make the drones that they use, and we are shooting them down with missiles that are tomahawks and whatnot. They're about $4 million. That's a terrible ratio of what it costs to make a drone versus what it costs to take them down, and they are nasty little things in warfare. Not to touch a lot on that, and then also they still have some missile capability left. And I think one of the things, if you want to kind of touch on the goals of this war, once we blew their um, nuclear facilities, up with the bomb busters and the bunker busters and whatnot that we did, I guess, 6, 9 months ago, whenever that was. Um, what we saw was, and you can see some charts on this, is that they really took up their manufacturing of missiles, these ballistic missiles that they have, and they're very destructive, and they can use those to create havoc. Around the world, but certainly in the Middle East, and they were firing tons of them at the beginning of it. We have militarily begun to wipe those out. Not just the missiles, but the manufacturing, the launching capabilities, and all those kind of things. And so, and probably also the material that it requires to get in there to build these things as well. So they're, shooting those off, much less frequently, but they can still blow up ships. And they've taken out some ships, out of the straits. These tankers that need to get through there. The insurance companies, Lloyd's of London, as an example, pulled their insurance coverage, on the ships, because if they go down, they've got millions of dollars, of oil on board, and so they have to insure that risk. And going through there is not only is it dangerous from losing their cargo, but also getting killed. And most of these oil tankers, these people that are crew members on there, they're not in the not they didn't sign up for the war. So, they're fearful of going through there. There's been promises made, and we've gotten some ships through there. I think, we're kind of policing that a bit and going to try to, see how that works. And also I think the French have kind of agreed to come over and help kind of police the strait. So anyway, longer than I kind of meant to go on that, but I think that's, from an investment perspective, right now, it's oil, and but oil trickles down to everything. There's the affordability crisis, there's inflation that we've been talking about all the way through this. All these things that factor in there. Oil prices drive every price of everything that we consume, not just directly, but also indirectly. I mean, and that's probably obvious, but it certainly is true. And so, we need, and again, we don't rely on the straits to get our. We're 70% reliant on our own oil supplies. We become, the biggest generator, of oil in the world, and we get 70% of our own supply from there. So we're not relying on that. Again, it's Asia. And you can make a case whether or not this is part of an overarching plan, by the Trump administration or not, from the Venezuelan situation to the Iranian situation. I think there are multiple components to those things, but I think one of those has to do with trade and the trade war and the power struggle with that we will continue to have with the Chinese, and that's mainly where this world is focused between the two powers, if you will, are the U.S. and China. And obviously, as tariffs, kind of got struck down in the form that they had by the Supreme Court, there's other avenues that we won't talk about on here. But where's another way to put a choke hold on the Chinese and force more fairness, if you will, at least from our perspective as Americans, maybe not all, but many Americans, and certainly this administration is how do you find leverage in a trade, in trade? How do you find the leverage that you need to keep some fairness in there based on the way the administration sees it? That's oil supply, right? Venezuela. I mean, where was China getting the other part of their oil supply? From Venezuela. And, that was the first part of this equation, if you right, wrong, or indifferent, that occurred there. I think there were multiple reasons why we went in there, but I think oil was certainly one of them. And I think in the Straits and in the Middle East, there's no question that's part of it right there. So, there's a lot of moving parts in that. So stay tuned, as that all plays forward. It's a pretty big risk for this administration. If you think about it, it's a big risk for the midterms, which they obviously want to win. So I would think that their intelligence and the things that they have right there, I mean, I think you give some benefit of the doubt here, that this thing will play out. I think it's very similar in conversation as how I think that we should, as investors, and my clients should look at this, and others that are listening would be, on April the 9th of last year, after Liberation Day, which was April 2nd, actually, right? When the tariffs were put on and the market reacted horribly to that right there and dropped, 10 to 15% in a 7-day time period. And I did a video talking about short-term pain, long-term gain. Give this time to play out. Do not begin to think that you need to make knee-jerk reactions, that the markets are not going to go straight down, that oil prices aren't going to go straight through the roof, that will begin to smooth its way out. And I think this is more of the same right here. It's a different type of war where it was a trade war before. This is an actual war. And, bombs and bullets, not tariffs and taxes and various things there, but they end up having some of the same effects. And they also, that are kind of underneath the hood. So I think you're going to feel some short-term pain, but I think the gain over the long pull, is going to be great. More, a bit of settling in the Middle East, of less disruption, and always with the fear of the Iranians creating mischief there in the Straits to strangle the world's oil supply, because that's their leverage point. So we're taking that away. I think we're also there to free the people up as well. So again, what I should have said to begin with is this war is going on. I ask everyone out there, as we are, pray for our soldiers, pray for those that have already lost their lives, that are in harm, and those that are in harm's way with those that have lost, those that have been wounded, their families. Also be with our leadership in prayer that they're making the right decisions, for us and the Iranian people and all the others in the Middle East, all that are affected by this, that our thoughts and prayers should be with them to get through this kind of thing. So it's easy to sit here and talk, on surface about, oh, it's a war and we see it and it's a video game. Looks like a video game when you watch it on TV. For those that are old enough to remember, it looks like 1991 when we went into the first Gulf War, right? It's the same type of thing with a little more vividness to it. We watched it, there's people in those buildings that are dying, and where we just look at it, we're kind of immune to it because of the way it looks. So don't do anything silly. If you want to ask more questions of me, feel free to reach out to me at B&H Wealth Strategies. Send me an email at jeff@bhretire.com. I'll answer them. But I think, again, what I should have said and led with, keep all these folks in our prayers. And
Amen, brother. Stay
yeah,
the course. Stay the course and pray for our troops and pray for a quick end.
absolutely. That's
Amen,
it.
brother. All right, Jeff, thank you so much. Very timely topic. I'm sure we'll revisit again soon in another episode.
Thanks, Jeff. Enjoyed it very much. You have a
Same
blessed
here.
week.
All right, you too. Thanks so
Thanks.
much, Jeff.
Thanks for tuning into the Four Seasons podcast, brought to you by B&H Wealth Strategies, where your financial success is our priority. Schedule your free 20-minute consultation today by calling 423-247-1152 or by visiting bhretire.com. Take the first step toward making your financial dreams come true. Until next time, remember, every season is the right season to plan for your future. Securities and registered investment advisory services offered through Silver Oak Securities, Inc., member FINRA SIPC. B&H Wealth Strategies and Silver Oak Securities, Inc. are not affiliated.